Sorry, that's the last phone call I'm going to be able to answer about the Zoom link. But we are recording this meeting, so if anybody can't get in, or if anybody hears from someone that can't get in, I did post the link on our website. So I'm not going to be able to answer the phone again while starting the meeting, but you can refer to the homepage on our website and it's there if someone's looking for the meeting link. Or forward them the link that I sent you if you hear from somebody. Not sure why some people didn't get it. All right, Matt and Amy, are you think ready?
Yeah, I think it's a
okay.
good time to start.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm Jessica Brody with the Vermont Recreation and Parks Association, and joining with me is Matt Witten and Amy Cunningham from the Vermont Arts Council. Can't talk today. We have 300 people signed up for this meeting today, which is amazing and great. But there's my phone again. We are only going to be able to host this meeting in a webinar type format. Since there are so many people, we won't have a lot of chance to have a ongoing discussion with so many people. So we're going to encourage you to use the chat and post comments and ideas in the chat. And what we'll do is review them after the meeting and send out a document that hopefully answers any questions that we don't answer during the meeting, as well as, send out additional information if people are looking for that. So again, if you need something specific and we don't cover it, post it in the chat and we'll get back to you all. In the meantime, I've introduced myself, sorry. Again, Jessica Brody, and our association is mainly made up of municipal departments and also state parks and recreation departments around the state. We have over 350 to 400 active members that range from commercial recreation and parks departments to state departments to commercial vendors, from playground vendors to surfacing vendors to recreation program providers, as well as several nonprofits that are a part of our association as well. And our main goal is to provide resources and trainings to anything parks and recreation around the state. And that includes artists and performing artists that, perform at our parks and, help deliver events and, meet with summer camp kids. So we're happy that you're all here. We're happy to help you. I started with the VRPA about 1.5 years ago, so I'm still relatively new in getting to know everyone in the state. But I hope to work with you all. And each year in the past, the VRPA has done a performance showcase in the fall, which I know some of you have attended. And in my time here, we have talked about how we can potentially change that so that it's more helpful to artists and linking you with communities and different events around the state. So, this conversation today is really just the beginning. It's our first initial discussion. We're thrilled with the excitement and people interested in this. So we're definitely going to continue these conversations moving forward in a way that makes the most sense after this meeting, whether that's, a couple breakout meetings or we'll figure that out. But this is the first one. So we're excited you're all here and just want you to know that, our association and I know Amy, we're here to help advocate for you and what you might need in the year ahead. So that's what this discussion is to start, just talk about COVID and how it's affected you and how we can all move forward in the months to come. So I'll stop talking for a minute, but that's a brief introduction to myself. One other reminder, if you could all just mute, if you're not muted already, I'll ask you to stay muted unless you're talking. And again, we encourage you to put your comments and questions in the chat and we'll review those after the meeting. So with no further ado, I'll go through some introductions. I mentioned Amy Cunningham from the Vermont Arts Council. I don't know why that's so hard for me to say. Amy, do you want to say hi?
Everyone, very happy to be here. I did want to mention one quick housekeeping piece, and that was that we had advertised that this meeting would be closed captioned, and unfortunately our live captioner, we had a scheduling issue. So this, if anyone is, when we post this meeting recording, it will have a transcription piece. So accessibility is important to us. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Amy. Also here with us, we have some people from the Vermont ACCD. I'd like to introduce Richard Moore. Richard, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, good morning. Richard Moray with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Planning and Outreach Manager there. I want to thank Jessica and Matt and Amy for bringing us together on this important topic and the leadership you guys have shown to bring this conversation today to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Shelley Pembroke.
Hi everyone, Shelley Pembroke. I'm the Marketing and Projects Coordinator for the Department of Economic and Development, also under the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Shelley. Gary Holloway.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. Gary Holloway, Downtown Program Manager at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And over the past year, I've been working with our team at ACCD to provide resources to communities, COVID relief, and marketing dollars and everything we can do to help support our communities. So I'm a resource in the room here today. Nice to be here.
Thank you, Gary. John Kessler.
Morning, everyone. I'm the General Counsel for the Agency of Commerce. So I work closely with Shelley and Richard and Gary on a lot of the COVID guidance as it applies to a variety of things. So glad to be here, and we'll try to give you the best outlook we can for the coming seasons.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Also with us today from the Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation, we have Rochelle Skinner and Caitlin Alford. Rochelle, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. I'm Rochelle. I am the Park Sales and Service Manager. I work with Caitlin. We do all the social media, web, and marketing. And in part of that, we host artists at our various venues throughout the state.
Thank you, Rochelle. Caitlin?
Hi, everyone. So like Rochelle said, I'm the Parks Communications and Customer Service Assistant. So I'm essentially her helper, help manage the website and do things like that. I'm really excited to get out here and help you all facilitate more performers in parks and see how we can do that safely and effectively.
Thank you, Caitlin. We have a few artist representatives today. I mentioned Matthew Witten. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jessica. I want to thank you, Jessica and Amy, for helping make this happen, this effort to open outdoor venues that'll be safe, hopefully, during COVID, to artists, not just performing artists, but other artists, and also makers, creators of various types, hopefully be able to interact with the public in the coming warmer seasons. I had this vision back in November based on a couple experiences I had as a musician and a performing musician. Most of our gigs were canceled last summer, spring, summer, fall, but we had a couple, we planned rain dates, and we played at a farmer's market. And I noticed that the public was extremely enthused to come out. And I also noticed that, especially at the farmers markets, the protocols were very strict and well organized, and it got me to thinking this fall and into the November. Maybe despite the prevalence of COVID and how bad things are with COVID right now, if we can plan carefully for next summer, maybe we could actually have a thriving public interaction scene in Vermont if it's well organized and safe. And so then I contacted Jessica at the Recreation Parks Association and Amy at the Vermont Arts Council. And so we decided to get people together to talk about ideas of what could work. And one of the recommendations Amy had was to talk to Dan Groberg at Montpelier Alive. And Montpelier Alive did have some events last summer. And so we'd like to hear from Dan. I know many of you have worked on really workable and exciting ideas for arts events and other events that worked during COVID. So we hopefully will get those in the chat and be able to round those up and sort of develop maybe something systematic so that we can have as many of these as possible. But Dan, I'd like to hear from you, maybe a couple events that you were able to pull off safely last summer.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Groberg. I'm the Executive Director of Montpelier Alive, and our mission is to create a more vibrant and livable Montpelier by celebrating Montpelier's downtown. So I'll briefly talk about some things we were able to do last year. We did have to cancel our Independence Day celebration, which is our biggest event of the year. We usually have between 10 and 15,000 people in attendance at that event, and just the scale of that does not really work with COVID, although we're starting to talk about what that might look like in 2021. But we were able to do some successful events. One was that we were able to pull off our annual Brown Bag Summer Concert Series. That's a lunchtime free summer concert series that takes place in downtown, and usually has, not a huge attendance, but maybe up to 100 people in attendance. Often there's people who come and go as they're like taking their lunch break from nearby offices, things like that. One of the biggest pieces for us was the limitation around how many square feet you needed for each attendee. So at least as we interpreted the ACCD guidelines, we understood that there needed to be 100 square feet per person, which is quite a lot of space. To give you some context, that Independence Day event that we have usually takes place on the State House lawn, 10 to 15,000 people. At the 100 square foot per person rule, we figured that we could have about 800 people on the State House lawn. So way fewer people than you might otherwise be able to hold in a space. So we knew we wanted to have a space that was big enough to have around the same attendance that we had normally, but we also knew that we wanted to have control over the site because we knew that we needed to manage capacity and other things. So we looked for sort of that perfect medium-sized Goldilocks space where we could fence off the space, but still have a good amount of people. So we did it at a outdoor space that a local church has, Christ Church Courtyard in Montpelier. And we determined that we could have about 45 to 50 people, depending on how you measure, in attendance. We did not take pre-registration. We just had people come, sort of first come, first serve, but we fenced off the area and we had one single check-in point where we counted how many people were inside. The other things that we did were contact tracing. So everyone who came had to give us their contact information. We did health screening questions for both the audience and the performers. Have you been out of state? Have you had any contact? The usual questions that you're used to hearing now. We did temperature checks on attendees and performers. And like I said, we limited the capacity. And we felt like it was very successful. We also reminded people frequently with signage and announcements to keep a distance. We didn't do any, I know some people did the circles on the grass or something like that. We did not do that, but people were very respectful. We also required masks, and this was before the state mask mandate. So we required masks for everyone in attendance. It was a very successful event. It was actually as well attended, if not better attended than in a normal year. What we heard from a lot of people was that it was their first opportunity to go to something, to see live music, to go to an event. And so people were really enthusiastic about it. The other event we did was later in the fall, which is an event we do every year called Moonlight Madness, which is usually a one-night event that's aimed at bringing shoppers downtown, but with street performers to create a lively atmosphere. We decided to spread it out over 3 days this year to manage the crowds, to spread out the crowds across a longer period of time instead of it just being this 4-hour period. And our performers, we specifically chose people who would be good for sort of passing by entertainment. So not someone who was like, you wanted to sit for a concert, but someone where you felt like there was, exciting things and fun things happening in town, but you didn't necessarily linger. And that was intentional so that we didn't have to worry as much about the crowds. We announced ahead of time that there were going to be performances and a list of performers, but we didn't announce the specific performances until half an hour ahead of time. So it was, I like to joke, it was the first time in my career planning events where we were trying to have fewer people in attendance versus getting more people to come. But, there was only, I think, 1 or 2 situations where it was getting close to where we were hitting that like ACCD guidance maximum number of people. And in that situation, we just really, encouraged people to distance. We were requiring masks again. At that time, it was required by the state. And it was very successful. And we were grateful to be able to support local artists and performers. So I know a lot of my other colleagues at downtown organizations were doing great events as well. And I hope people will post in the chat, and please feel free to contact me, director@montpelieralive.org, and I put my email in the chat as well if you would like to speak about it more. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. That's great. Jessica, do you want to swing over to some guideline discussion?
If I did see a quick question in the chat for Dan, if we've got time.
Sure, yeah.
Just a question from Kathy. Were there any issues with taking masks off to eat and then leaving them off, having to monitor that with participants?
We did allow people to take off their masks to eat or drink. We reminded them regularly to do it only while they were actively eating or drinking. There were a couple occasions where people were sort of abusing it, and usually they were within like their pod or by themselves and distance from other people, but we did go around a couple times to specific people and just ask them nicely. We never had an issue where we needed to ask anyone to leave or where someone didn't respect the direction we were giving.
And one other quick question, someone's wondering, how many of these brown bag concerts did you do? How many
we did 6 concerts. We usually do 8 or 9. It's usually the entire months of August and September. We decided to start a little later just because at the time we were planning it, it felt like things were sort of opening up and getting better. So we started in mid-August instead of early August. Also, this was just a practical concern on our part, was we were worried about getting enough sponsors we rely on local businesses for sponsorships, and obviously they were really hurting. So we thought that we'd have better luck getting 6 sponsors than we would 9.
And Dan, I just saw one more question about how you kept track of contact lists.
We just had a clipboard and we had people fill out the information. We sanitized the pens between every person, which seemed a little ridiculous, but and we just kept the contact list for like 4 weeks after each event and then shredded it.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan.
And one more small detail question. So it's supposed to be 10 by 10 square feet per person, but does that include a family pod?
That is a good question that maybe someone from ACCD could answer or could have answered, but we sort of just use that 100 square feet per person to calculate the total number of people we could have in the space, and then figured that it would work itself out within that.
Thank you. Cindy just posted a link in the chat, and we will get to some more of the details on the guidelines. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. Matt, I just want to make sure we introduce everyone. I also had Jason Bratton on our list. And did you want to call on anybody else as far as giving an example of the last year's events? I know
I think for now, I think there's so many. I'm seeing Very Merry Theater did a lot. I think we should probably move on to guidelines, and if there's time, we can talk about what maybe worked best.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan and Matt, for sharing your insights and examples from last year. So we'll go over to Vermont ACCD, and Richard, do you want to help me? I don't know which one of you wants to start.
Yeah, absolutely, Jessica. Thank you. I'll do a quick introduction, then I'll pass on the mic to either John or Shelley and Gary for that matter too. You know, as we've all witnessed firsthand, the pandemic has had a profound impact on the arts and culture sectors. You know, the theaters across the state, across the country were dark, concerts, music festivals were shut down, museums closed, art galleries closed as well. And, you know, all our events in our downtowns were canceled or adapted. You know, and the pandemic not only had a devastating impact on the economics and livelihood of these institutions and local artists, but is also isolating the public from one of the things that needs most right now, that essential connection that comes from sharing the arts, cultural experiences, and music in our communities. But with all these challenges, I've been quite impressed with how performing artists and cultural organizations and Vermonters are, you know, swapping physical performance spaces for virtual ones, staying engaged in local communities, and really finding creative ways to maintain these connections and share the profound joys that binds us together through the arts and music and culture activities. And I hope 2021 brings us together more and in person to enjoy the arts and cultural events in our villages and downtowns. And I want to share through the Better Places partnership over the past year, we hope to support more local communities engaging in these types of projects to improve public spaces and bring creative programming into outdoor spaces in our downtowns and village centers. Please tune in to the Vermont legislature for the Better Places bill that will likely be introduced sometime next week to help provide another tool to support improvements in public spaces and offer venues to provide safe outdoor cultural programming and event series. With that said, I'd like to introduce my colleagues, John Kessler, Shelley Pembroke, and Gary Holloway to share and discuss more about the COVID safety guidelines from last summer and what to expect this coming spring and summer as well.
Thank you, Richard. Welcome, Shelley, Gary, and John.
Yeah, hi. This is Gary Holloway. I'm gonna defer to John and Shelley to kind of go through the existing guidance we have, and obviously we don't have a crystal ball to imagine what the guidance is going to look like exactly in 2021. And as an event planner myself, I know that it's really hard to plan for things that are unknown and to come up with kind of options A and B. We like to have reliability as event planners, but like Richard said, it's been pretty impressive to see people around the state, communities around the state, be flexible and be creative and think out of the box. There are a lot of opportunities. And on that note, I think, what I'm hoping to see, from this call today and as we move forward, that we can kind of create some resources for communities to share their ideas easily. We're going to touch on some of those today. You already heard some examples, on creative, event planning. But if we could imagine a place where folks could go and grab some of those ideas, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, I think that's a big part of why we're talking here today. So maybe we can follow up and we can discuss, offline some strategies on how we might do that, or maybe perhaps there's time today that we can get into that a little bit. But I think that would be really helpful for you all to have those resources. We've been meeting weekly and now every other week with all our downtown directors as part of the downtown program. And that's been really helpful for us to kind of share those ideas on kind of a regular basis as far as how we're handling the pandemic in various areas. So that's another option for folks. But I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to either Shelley or John, who may be able to speak a little. They've been a little bit closer to some of the day-to-day, week-to-week guidance that we've been putting out at the agency. And so, Shelley, John, I don't know which one of you wants to grab it from here.
I'm gonna let John probably take the lead, but I think, Richard, you might have shared the link to the ACCD website where we have the current guidance. I saw somebody share that out there. But that's one of the things that I just kind of wanted to share too, was that, that is where updates to the guidance will be. If anybody follows our social media channels, once we do have updates, we do let people know as well as a COVID newsletter, which I will share all that information in the chat for you. So John, I'm not sure if you want to, I know we don't have the crystal ball, but if you want to talk a little bit about how the guidance is determined.
I have an 8-ball. We can roll that around and see what it says. No, may not be good answers. Well, I thought for starters, it'd be helpful to explain to everybody on the call what is behind the curtain. You say, Shelley just said we don't have a crystal ball, and that is very true. But first of all, I don't think many Vermonters ever even heard of our agency until COVID. And now they know our acronym as well, which is surprising. But I think it'd be helpful to know that the guidance process is set up is the governor created a restart team at the top of a pyramid, we'll say, where he sits. And those are the key advisors that make recommendations to him. And as you would imagine, that would include Dr. Levine. And I believe it includes Lindsay, Curley, or Ted, one or the other, whoever's available. So you've got health, and you got the business community from commerce. And I think Mike Sherling from public safety as well. And that's sort of the core. And Julie Moore from A&R, I think, is also a regular on that because of, we have Jessica from the parks perspective, but they have a lot to do. And a lot of people have been assigned to do things that aren't really central or even sometimes even part of their normal duties. So that's, Julie Moore became the leader on our sports guidance just because of the parks and recreation. But it's not like A&R ever did sports guidance before. And to give you an example, I always realized some people never played baseball when they thought keeping the catcher 6 feet away from the batter in Little League might be a good change to make. Anybody who ever coached kids in Little League knows what happens if you move a catcher. It's hard enough for a catcher. But that's sort of just how that works. And then we got assigned last March to be the lead agency on guidance for restarting and business operations. Health does public health, but we do all the rest, and we coordinate closely with them. And then you have all these small subgroups. There's a sports subgroup. There's the college, special group that was created. There's a schools education group, and so on. And I know there's also one that deals with events, the tourism side, events and marketing and restaurants. A lot of the things that are tied up into that. So it's not, just to be clear, and that's what's challenging for Shelley, for me, and Gary and Richard to an extent as well, is all this sort of funnels into the ACCD guidance, but it's not as though we were necessarily involved. In fact, we're not involved in probably a majority of the guidance that's developed. So putting into perspective, we're taking a narrow slice here today, looking at arts events and activities. And we haven't necessarily been involved in the development of all of those, but we definitely have to answer a lot of questions. And sometimes the questions we answer and questions you ask today are ones that we feed back up into that process. So when we get asked about arts events, can we do it this way? Would this be acceptable? If there isn't a clear answer and we have a sense that this is worth, wrestling with to come up with the solution, it gets fed up the chain, and then it'll lead to a guidance change. So this effort today, in a way, is doing that. In other words, you're raising questions. How can we do this based on our new experience from last year and looking forward to the seasons coming up? And so ideas and questions that come up today that they're not round pegs and round holes in our guidance are ones that we may try to sand the corners off and say, but that makes sense. And I'll give you one last example before maybe seeing if there are any questions. And that is, in the beginning, events, you had the limitations, 150 outdoors, 75 indoors, et cetera, and you're familiar with those. But it wasn't immediately thought of that, well, what about cycling through, say, seatings? And not just arts, but other events where you could have 150 people in a block of time, and then they're done, they leave, another 150. And that was popular for like craft shows and outdoor events. But the same could be true for galleries and performances indoors. So I'm offering that as an example of the kind of, rethinking we do all the time. As you know, the most worn out word, which won't be the word of 2020, will be unprecedented, because we really don't have anything to fall back on. And now we have last year to fall back on, and we're hoping we don't need all the restrictions we had last year, right? So I think I'd encourage everyone on the phone call this morning to not hesitate to think flexibly and creatively, no matter what happened last year, to think of ways where, even though our guidance says these boundaries exist, it's truly an environment where you can ask the question. And that's what Shelley and I get a lot of. And I get an awful lot of, well, this isn't clearly answered in the guidance. It sounds like a legal question. And then it comes to me and I don't have an answer, but I have to answer it. And I was asked early by Lindsay in the governor's office not to do what a lawyer does, which is write up a recommendation, because they said there isn't time for that. So we literally, on a lot of these, we make answers and hope that they're within the boundaries of what the governor had intended in his orders. So that's a broad look at what we do, how we do it, and I'd encourage you to, posit those questions, offer those ideas that seem reasonable to you in terms of public health, safety, and operations, but at the same time allowing for some of the traditional activities that we are used to and that we miss so much.
Thanks, John. I just want to say I'm very encouraged by your invocation for us to think creatively, and even if something hasn't been done before, to send it up the flagpole and see what the guidance might be. That's very encouraging.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to just echo that and say that we fielded a lot of questions from arts organizations and performing artists and have sent them to you all for those kind of specific rulings. And so thank you for that kind of flexibility and that open door. I know that this is unprecedented, the word that we weren't going to use, right?
No, thank you, John and Richard and Shelley and Gary. We really appreciate you being here and giving us that overview and reminder of, everyone's doing things above their call of duty originally, and we're all navigating this unknown path together. So we appreciate you being here to continue the discussion. John, if our association and Amy are able to gather feedback in the coming months, I know our association helped with that to open summer camps, as well as ice arenas. We gathered some feedback on the guidance. So is there a particular person I should stay in touch with to relay that information to help you guys on your end?
If it is a question about existing guidance and wondering about interpretation of it to a sort of a different application, then that'd be fine to come to me. If it's creating a new approach entirely, then if it continues like it did last year, I suspect that Julie Moore, the Secretary of Natural Resources, will be the lead on those. You may recall, you mentioned the camps, and this is a good example of the kind of flexibility that exists. In terms of dropping kids off at the camps last year, if you ever read the guidance, it was very well thought out, but it wasn't arrived at easily or quickly in terms of how you traveled to Vermont, how you dropped the kids off, how the kids at the overnight camps stayed in certain numbers for a certain period of time. And it was all with an eye towards managing that risk. That's why, as long as you have your thinking hats on and you're thinking about ideas that are considering ways to maintain, at least, for the next whatever months, ways to maintain distance, reliably, and numbers, and information is important too. Being able to track, attendees and for contact tracing, et cetera. But it isn't, we all know the key ingredients at this point, right? Mask, distance, sanitizing. It's kind of like our name rank serial number at this point. But as long as you're thinking of a slightly different way to achieve your goal with those principles in mind, those are generally, I think, pretty reasonable recommendations and worth developing and making.
There are a couple of specific questions in the chat for John and Shelley. Is that okay, Jessica? We have a little time for maybe a couple of those.
Yeah, we can take a few, and if we didn't answer at the end, if everyone else, feel free to add your question in the chat, and we'll.
So we've got a question. Great. We've got a question from Tracy. The state historic sites were discouraged from having outdoor seating available at the sites. Has the thinking changed at all on this? Outdoor seating availability?
Not that I'm aware, but I think that a good way to understand this would be thinking about, and I think that this isn't the only factor, but it's a key factor. And one of the governor press briefings a few weeks ago, it was after the November tightening of the restrictions, and somebody asked, people are always looking, well, this doesn't square with another type of guidance. And the question was, why can't households gather with any other household with the holidays coming up? But a household can go to a restaurant where there might be other households all over. And for some, wanting that, as we know, that desire to gather with others is the strongest desire, being social creatures. So that was, that shapes the thinking and the question. But Mike Sherling had, the Commissioner of Public Safety, our former secretary, had a great answer, which is the right answer, which is that at a restaurant, you go as a household, you stay as a household at your table, and you're distant from any other household, and you're also in a controlled setting where the restaurant is governed by those specific restrictions. And they also have, of course, their self-interest of staying open. The last thing they want to do is close. And so it's a whole different environment than a home where people gather, even outdoors. So as, like, say at a historic site, if you have a couple picnic tables and you have people coming to the historic site, if there isn't that was the concern, is that management aspect, the control aspect of sort of that open seating versus controlled seating and distance and everything else in a restaurant. It's not the only factor, but I know that's a large factor. That's why I say, when you think of suggestions and ideas, there are probably other ways to do that. Well, wait a minute, but what if the seating was done this way? Would that work? And that's how the guidance evolves and changes from its initial starting point that doesn't suit all interests, and where it can, it does flex where it can, where we protect the health interests and serve the public interest requested. So long answer, but that's what I do as a lawyer. And for Tracy, the tables at the historic sites, until that changes, that's the way it is. It's sort of like clubs. I was just answering one yesterday on the social clubs. They're closed, flat out just closed. All social clubs closed. But there are clubs that are open to the public, not just members. It hasn't changed yet, but there's always a slight variation that exists, and whether it changes or not, it's always up for debate.
John, I have, sorry, Amy.
There are some other specific questions, but just keeping an eye on time, I'll ask folks to, I think that reference, if someone could pop back up the ACCD guidelines website. A lot of this is going to be answered there, but we'll also be addressing each of these individual questions as we save this chat and follow up.
I just had one question for you, yes, John, while we have you. In terms of opening the spigot in the spring and summer, and someone asked a question similar to this as far as group gathering sizes, is there a specific number of case counts around the state that you guys look for before you determine that? And how far in advance do you think, I know that might be an impossible question to answer, but what are you guys looking for before you start opening it back up again, so we can have some type of idea going forward?
Well, first, I want to say that in addition to our guidance and the link that's provided, there is a chat bot there as well that gets you some really quick turnaround to basic questions. So it doesn't always have to be a formal written email. In terms of your question there about the case count, it's really, I don't know of anything other than what Mike Pichak uses when he does his update at the governor's press briefings. He sets those so-called guardrails. So he has certain numbers on hospital counts and case counts, et cetera, that are established, and those are public at every press briefing. But other than those, what I see generally happening that affects the governor's decision-making is trend data. So it's not so much waiting till you hit a number, it's seeing the pattern that's occurring. And even, and other factors too. That's what happened in November. In a way, it was a silver lining to that dark cloud of restrictions mid-November, that the silver lining being that because Halloween surprised everybody with an impact on our case increase, it gave the governor the advanced ability to clamp down before Thanksgiving. Hadn't we had the Halloween impact, we might have sailed right into Thanksgiving holding our breaths to only be overwhelmed afterwards. So there's also that scheduling and calendar information that they take into account. So it's not just data, it's also, there is some predictability, and we got some of that from the Canadian data, because the Canadian Thanksgiving was a month before. So it's a variety of factors. It's not just a number. It's not, it's not like being in a hospital when your heart rate goes below a number and the little alarm goes off. It's not that automatic.
Thank you, John. Mm-hmm. And again, I know a lot of you have some great questions, and we will try to follow up. We will follow up with those, but we may need to schedule more meetings to dive into some more of those questions. I know vaccines are going to be a hot topic and how we handle those in the future. So, that's one of them that I'm sure we'll need a much more lengthy discussion to cover as we navigate that. Mm-hmm. Amy, did you see Matt, any other questions that you feel?
I see there's an important point about not just COVID safety, but also amenities such as hand washing and a sanitation. And I think probably we don't need to get into that right now, but that when we do talk about next steps, probably one aspect of what we work out or what we break up into as far as teams go or tasks would be to cover various types of issues that would facilitate safe outdoor events, such as the providing of hand washing and porta potties and some shelter to increase predictability of scheduling. But I don't know that we need to get into that right now, but I really appreciate, Tricia, your comment. Amy, did you see any others that you thought we should bring up now?
You're muted, Amy.
There's a bunch of good questions. I think that a lot of them are addressed within the guidance, and I think just keeping an eye on the time, I think we should follow up with them to provide clarification in that way.
Great.
Jessica,
well, thank you, Richard, and Shelley, and Gary, and John. Thank you.
I was going to say, I think you'll find more flexibility with the outdoor. And I wanted to, I hate to give this reminder, but in the news, you'll know there's the emerging strains of the virus that are dramatically more contagious. So the indoor settings, to the extent we still have the case counts, the indoor settings with a more contagious variant will probably change how they're approached versus the outdoor settings. That's my guess as spring comes.
Yeah, I think that's been the assumption all along, is that you know, outdoor is probably the safest to plan for right now in the foreseeable future. And we can hope for something different maybe in 2022.
Right. I'm just saying that this new variant, that not just there are multiple new variants now.
Yeah.
And if they can linger in the air for hours, that's where the indoor, I think, unlike last year, it might be quite different. It could be quite different than it was last year as far as indoor versus outdoor. So that's why you're right. It's always been the case, but I'm just trying to say it might be even more so because of those variants.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
thank you. Well, thank you again to all of you for speaking so far. Amy, do you want to take over and give an overview of Creative Ground?
Sure. This will be really brief. So first of all, this is Matthew's brainchild, and I'm so grateful that he kind of conceived of this and brought these conversations up with us. And as we were in, I think one of our first conversations, Matt, we were, as you were describing this project to me, we identified this need for, you know, part of these conversations might be a little bit of matchmaking. You know, part of this is understanding who are the performing artists and artists in other disciplines who are chomping at the bit to get out there and perform in a safe way in safe outdoor venues, which is the theme for this conversation this year, when it is safe. And then what are the venues that are out there right now? And so to that end, I just wanted to make sure this will be new to some of you, and this will be old hat to others. I just wanted to make sure that you all were familiar with an existing free directory called Creative Ground. That is a directory for the creative economy as a whole. It's run by the New England Foundation for the Arts. And I'm going to do a quick share screen, which is, oh boy, sharing screen is always challenging when you have entirely too many windows open, as I do, but I think that this may work. Bear with me a minute.
That's always my problem too, Amy, no worries.
Too much open. Okay. You all seeing that?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so on our website, this is the Vermont Arts Council website. And when you go over to resources, you'll see this page for Arts Directory. And it takes you here to this explanation of Creative Ground. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just wanted organizations, towns, recreation folks who have venues, and all the artists on this call just to know that this exists and it's free. And it might be, as we have further conversations about potentially trying to organize something a little bit more formally for outdoor venue performances this year, that this might be a good resource for us. So when I go into Creative Ground, it is New England based. You can see here, if you go to get listed, you can create a free profile, you log in, and wanted to show you, there's a million different filters, but the key ones for you to know is that you can filter by Vermont. You can also get much more specific in terms of distance and postal code and activities and institution types and disciplines. I think what is really useful for us to pay attention to is folks who are touring artists. And in addition, there are filters for those of you who from organizations or towns. You can create a profile that clarifies what kind of venue you have, and if it's available for rent or use, and what kind of accessibility and stage details there are. So again, this is the sort of thing that we could have a separate breakout conversation for at another time as we continue these conversations, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of this free tool as we continue to matchmake and come up with opportunities for safe outdoor artistic expressions and experiences this year.
That's great, Amy. David Punia just put the link in the chat. So
thank you. What a great resource. Thank you, Amy.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. This is Jenny Albert from the Arts Bus. I've seen several times folks get together and talk about having a resource like this, and I know I've needed this very much. So thank you so much for putting that together. That's a lot of work. So it's like 2 years at least from since I've been in Vermont that I've been looking for something like that.
The New England Foundation for the Arts has put this together. And so the other benefit is that you can look for artists actually outside of our borders. I mean, we know we want Vermont artists, but there are, I understand there are artists outside of the state that, you know, it's good to know about.
Thank you, Amy.
I was thinking we would look at some particular points or questions. Is that okay, Amy, if I harvest a little bit of the chat?
The floor is yours.
Matthew Perry, I noticed you made a comment about taking things on the road. I'm just generally curious. I have sort of two wonderings. One, aside from performing artists, I'm a performing artist, so I understand sort of that domain. How have other artists interacted with the public or envisioned interacting with the public? And then how the sort of the bugaboo of all this is how to deal with rain, you know, and foul weather. And so Matthew, I just want to start maybe with you, because I know you do other types of art besides performing. So how tell us about how taking things on the road and maybe how you dealt with weather.
Well, I think, thanks. You know, we have the Art Bus, which is our mission in motion. And so we built a stage on top of that to go right out with live music. And we did a couple parades. On April 25th, we did a Stay in Your Car parade. And that was kind of at the peak of, you know, the COVID happening. So we kind of just, you know, with parades like that, you know, if it rains, you know, everybody brings umbrellas, or they parade with tarps over them, or you get more creative. You know, it's just another challenge. You know, weather is, so it's been more challenging lately with the cold, but I think, yeah, I mean, it's hard to answer a question about the weather, especially in Vermont. I mean, I think you just have to get out there and do it. And if it's bad weather, maybe you can have a rain date, or, you know, everything we've done so far has been, you know, fairly good with the weather. So, you know, we've done several drive-bys at the Veterans Home and getting out into the community with the Halloween parade, and just, you know, doing some more project-based events that we just kind of, we do, and then we let them happen. They're not involved with, the whole community gets to witness it and be exposed to it, and not necessarily, they partake in it in a different way rather than one gathering. I don't know if that helps or answers.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I know you do a lot of interactive art projects with people. Were you able to do that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, we had, you know, besides the parades, and, you know, we just kind of, you know, we addressed the, you know, we kind of did it by, you know, online, like celebrating everybody that was graduating this year. It really changed their life. I had a senior in my house, you know, and I saw how it affected him. So we just kind of put, you know, we painted a hillside, we spray painted a big hillside, you know, congratulations. And we invited family members to hang signs on the chain link fence of the basketball court. And we just did that. I think if you put a call out, people will come. If you give them the opportunity, they'll rise to the occasion and they'll get creative. We showed them a few things, like putting, you know, clear packing tape over your posters to protect it from the weather. And that's all you need to do. And they do it. And there were, lots of signs all over the, it just was great. And I think it made the kids feel good. So they're rather simple. And I think, I found you might find working with the highway supervisor, better than working with your chamber director. I think you have to look for the different, we have to do things differently. And so it's not the regular route. It's not the front door, it's the back door that you kind of have to look for, I think, I found.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. We're running short on time, and I know a lot of people are jumping off for things they have at 11. As we mentioned, it's hard to have an open discussion with this many people. So if you have the agenda and can see the questions, I'd certainly encourage you to write in the chat, what do artists and performers need to connect with the public in 2021? If you want to post something there, do you have examples of workable solutions in 2020 that could be tried in more places? Let us know your thoughts and what potential venues have artists been talking with? I know, just jumping through the agenda, we're hoping to schedule a meeting in the future with community leaders to help, like we said, link you together. And I've reached out to, like Caitlin is on the call today from Vermont State Parks. And, it'd be great to have a resource of all the existing outdoor venues in the state, both with state parks and community parks. So that's something that I hope to work on with those interested. And, I think we'll just digest what we learned today and talked about and schedule some more meetings, whether there are specific topics to discuss in smaller groups or Matt, Amy, where else do you want to go with the meeting now that we're at our ending and a lot of people are jumping off, so I don't want to miss anything before people leave.
Quickly thank Matt and Jessica and thank everybody for making time for this call. And I just wanted to reflect that, among the many things that this pandemic has shone a bright light on, it has emphasized the fact that our artistic and creative community in Vermont, you're all using your creative muscles to create your way out of this. And I've just been enormously inspired by the solutions and the flexibility of all Vermonters and folks in our creative community as well. And it's also shown a really bright light on how much we need each other and how much we want to go to performances. I cried the first time this summer when I went to an outdoor play, and it hadn't really hit me how much I missed it until I was there in a community. And I think obviously I'm preaching to the choir here. You all know this, but thanks for all you do, and what you do is so important. And I'm on a daily basis incredibly inspired by the creative community in Vermont.
Nicely said, Amy. So I think what the next steps, Jessica and Amy and I will put our heads together, look at the chat, and then put the word out as far as next steps that we can take collectively to facilitate venues that are for all artists and makers in the coming year.
And me and Matt before the meeting had talked about future action items for this meeting. So I just want to let you all know what we're thinking about. One I mentioned was the list of possible venues. Also possibly creating teams for funding, helping with the guidelines, creating ACCD reps talked about best practices for sharing events for this summer. So creating something where we can easily share that. What else did we talk about? We can form different, whether it's committees or task force, I think, to help with some of these things, form a temporary shelter team that could help consolidate info about tents and rentals. So I think there's a lot we can do moving forward. And again, this was the first discussion, and we're grateful for all the comments that we see in the chat. We will go through those, and we'll follow up with whatever the next meeting makes the most sense to have. And we'll stay in touch with future meetings as well. And, just want you to know that I'm interested in working with you, as is Amy and Matt. And Matt, thank you for reaching out and, bringing this idea forward and connecting all of us. Because I think part of what COVID has taught us is that we need to stay in touch with each other and get creative to learn things. And I think it's great that we're thinking outside the box, because I've seen some some great things that will continue moving forward. You know, being outside it's a great place to be in Vermont, to be outside. So
that's right. We'll be in touch. I think, yeah, we'll be in touch, and this is very encouraging, and I think our collective energies will come up with some great solutions.
Well, thank you all again for being here. If you want to check out our website, it's vrpa.org. I can put the link in the chat, but we will be in touch, and thank you all again for attending today.
Thanks, everybody. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just hanging on for a minute, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm hanging on to save the chat at the very, very end so I don't miss anything.
Yeah, there's things still in there.
I haven't gotten off yet. This is Robert McBride. I was just wondering if we could maybe the money that was given out by the state to communities that bought tents or lights this summer, that I can remember. I remember our development director down here in Rockingham had applied for some money. It would be really great just to track how those communities used it and maybe ask them to give a little follow-up report on sharing the money that was spent. Because I think it was for like outdoor kinds of, there was a variety of things, and I don't know the detail, but I know that communities did apply. And if the money went out, what did you do? And how are you going to use it again? And maybe they could, you know, in a little summary, or if the money, you know, if they had to give some summary back to the state on how they spent that money, it would be great.
So that was probably through VACCD?
Yeah,
right?
it was, yeah. It was probably, yes, to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, I believe. And it was when they were trying to get the open sidewalk stuff going, and, you know, but okay, we spent money and that's great. And are you going to use that stuff again? You know, they all were firsthand receivers of something, and they might have some really great positive or negative kind of feedback to give about the use of it.
I think that's a program that Gary may have administered with downtown. Yeah, let's circle back. That's a great thought.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Tents out there just waiting to be popped back up.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or they never came down. Anyway, thank you all. It was a great meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for organizing this. Thanks, Jessica. This was a fantastic meeting.
Thank you for attending.
All right.
I'm glad you
Thanks, guys. Will you make a link available to the recording of the meeting?
Yes, I will. That takes a few hours to process, so it won't be today, but I'll send that out to the contact list that we have from everyone that registered today. So I'll send that link.
Terrific. Thank you so much, and thanks.
Hopefully everyone gets that email. Anybody else still on that has any questions or thoughts?